So I think it's a really interesting future trend. I know everyone's talking about AI. We can talk about that. But sovereign cloud, the pendulum's going that way. It's still cloud.
Здравейте, приятели! И добре дошли в първи епизод на Look We Found, подкастът за хората от IT индустрията. Днес ви представяме човек, започнал пътя си през вълнуващите дни на .com бума, който и сега е част от пейзажа на индустрията, Стив Кайл, Индиана Джоунс на българската IT сцена. Той стои зад компании като MariaDB, Mammoth DB, VMWare, Sciant и много други. Стив е едно от най-значимите имена на народния IT пазар и ние нямаме търпение да сподели невероятното си пътуване с всички нас. Така че подгответе се и посрещнете първият ни гост, Стив Кайл.
Hi, Steve.
Hello, Momchil. What's up, mate?
Hope you're legendary as per usual.
Well, we'll find out, right?
Okay.
The audience will judge.
Yeah.
Actually, Steve, we're usually referring to you at the office as one of the most interesting people in the Bulgarian IT industry that not that many people knows about. So, yeah, fist bump.
The well-kept secret.
Yeah.
Thank you.
True that.
I'm going to come by your office more.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are always welcome.
We got more of the good coffee.
Yeah. So, can you share a little bit more about your background and actually how you got started in the tech industry?
Oh, gosh. I feel like I'm going to age myself, mate. Because it goes back to the first .com boom. I was actually working I was in university, but my job during university was like an IT manager kind of, because it was all kind of new back then, at a urology company, at a medical firm. Yeah, and I worked there 5 years doing a mix of like IT support and R&D support for research in urology. And I got to the point where, I don't know, there wasn't really much for me to advance there anymore. And my roommate at the time, his name was Brad Toffel. He's still in the IT industry. He got this job at this, quote, internet startup, a .com startup, which was super new at the time, and nobody really knew what they were. And he's like, hey, we're hiring, Steve, and we're just hiring anyone almost, because back then it was like it was all new, yeah. So he's like, just come for an interview. And I did, and they offered me a job, and it was like, I don't know, twice the money I was making before. And it was this weird sort of .com startup called Amphibian that was it was funded by a really cool Swedish guy named Jan Stenbeck. He's since passed away, but he created this multi-billion-dollar empire in internet based out of Sweden. And he was a real disruptor, and this is one of his funded startups. And I went to work there. Then I went to Sydney, and so it was just kind of by chance, right? Because my roommate worked there. Then I went to Sydney. I'm originally Australian, and I worked, again, this is like 98, 99, at this company called BMC Media. And it was like the double click of Asia Pac. And it was doing online advertising way back then. Like we even did it for the 2000 Olympics in Sydney. And it was one of those situations where, I don't know, somehow we went public with very little revenues, and we were worth like $1 billion on the Aussie ASX, and my share options were worth like millions. And then the .com crash hit, and I cashed out at $9,500 Aussie, which is like, pesos. And I'm joking, as fellow Australians, I'm joking. But that was sort of like, so I kind of went from Amphibian to BMC Media, which was like this internet darling in Australia for a while. And I just kind of got into that way. So sort of, because I had a cool roommate, I guess.
So this happened how many years ago, actually?
Oh, man. See, you want to age me. You want to age me.
Yeah.
This is why I don't do these interviews. That was my first one, Amphibian, was in 95.
Okay.
And then BMC Media was in 98 or 99. And then I came to Bulgaria, and I actually took a job in manufacturing. It wasn't IT. So I got a job as an interim COO in manufacturing at a pretty large plant. They had 3,000 people making like industrial parts, car parts, electronics, things like that. So it wasn't IT. And I kind of got back into IT because I was there for 3 months for my sort of interim probation period, and they gave me a permanent offer. But at the same time, I got an offer from a headhunter. So some kudos. There are some good headhunters. And they gave me this opportunity, if you would call it was an opportunity, to go be the CEO of a really small, it was like only 60 or 55 people, maybe 60, I forget, maybe 50, 65 at the time. And it was a struggle for me because of where I was at. It was like COO of a 3,000 person company. And then do I switch to a 55, 60 person company as CEO or not for less money? But I took the job mostly because I was really frustrated at the time with the executive management at the manufacturing firm. Because I was really into Kaizen and like quality improvement and stuff. And they weren't.
Yeah.
Surprise.
What upset me is there was so much potential for improvement at the firm. They were good. They were really good. But we could have been way better, right? We could have doubled, and we could have had much happier employees. You know, it's one of those things where like they penalize for quality on the production line. And what does that incentivize employees to do? Is to hide a mistake, right? Because they had to come in on their weekends and actually on their own time and pay a penalty for bad quality. So what are you going to do? It incentivizes human nature. You hide it. And as you hide a bad quality piece, what really happens is it ends up getting to the customer who then puts it in their car. For example, we had a case with Renault who put in some bad piece and it messes up at that point. And then you have a much larger problem because the farther it gets down the supply chain to the customer, the bigger the problem. And so we had the opportunity to do so many improvements right at the heart of it, and we didn't. And that was very frustrating for me. And so I had made these like suggestions endlessly, and including like right before I was going to quit, I decided I'll try one more time. And I made like this 3-page bullets of like things we should do to like improve our processes, our operations, whatever. And the CEO was like, I just can't be bothered. And he was a cool guy. I mean, I understand where he was coming from. It was a lot of effort to change, right? And I was like, okay, forget it. I'm going to take the smaller opportunity because it's my chance to take the ideas I have and affect change. So I'm going to take a demotion, if you will, almost. And then I got back into tech that way because it was a software development company. So that's how I got into tech in Sofia. Yeah. I will say, can I say the stupid story?
Yeah, sure.
Come on.
Please.
All right. They had
That's
those
the point
things
of
where
that
they do
podcast.
these tests as part of the HR recruitment. They wanted me to do like some psych tests and things like that. And I was actually not unhappy at the other job, and it was a good job at the time. And I told them up front I didn't want to do these silly little whatever tests. So I got there, and then they said it's a third interview. And they surprised me by giving me one of those tests. They kind of lied to me and said that the headhunting firm.
Is that your first experience with Bulgaria?
My first experience with Bulgarian headhunting firms, yes. And they sprung this little test on me. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Because like, I took off a couple hours from work to go there and do that. And I had already told them up front, I don't want to do those silly little tests. And they gave me this little test. And I kid you not, I made a Christmas tree. Because they had those little dots you're supposed to answer. So I literally made a Christmas tree and I gave it back to the woman. And she was not pleased. Yeah.
We still got the offer though.
Well, luckily the CEO or the chairman of the company, the shareholders had a sense of humor.
Maybe it was Christmas miracle though.
It could have been. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I love Christmas miracles. Who doesn't? Yeah. Anyway, so that's how I got into tech, specifically in Bulgaria, if that was a roundabout question.
So how do you go from starting out at a small 60 or so people company to being CEO of Blastcap? We know you have some interesting experience
Along the way.
Yeah, some very notable names in there.
Well, we grew that company to about 300 people, and we had offices in Sofia, Varna, and Ho Chi Minh City. And then we sold it to VMWare. And after that, I started a company I started 2 companies, and we merged them. One was called Zentio, one was called FreightSight. FreightSight was specifically targeting like logistics and the supply chain industry. And Zentio was trying to do business intelligence consulting, development, like data warehouse kind of stuff. And we merged the 2 of them together. And it was our experience selling and working in consulting and developing data warehouse solutions that sort of illustrated to us an opportunity that data warehousing and business intelligence was kind of important, but it was like a nice to have because it's not mission critical. You know, SAP runs your mission critical systems, whatever. So you always pay money for that. BI and data intelligence was kind of like, it'd be great if I had it, but it's not the end of the world if I don't. And it's so expensive because you had systems like Teradata at the time, which was millions, that a lot of companies were just like, I'll go without it. So it was that experience that made us think, gosh, what if we could reduce the cost of a data warehouse? And so you don't have to have Oracle Exadata or Teradata. And so we, out of that kind of consulting and outsourcing firm, and that firm was good to us, don't get me wrong, because Zentia was doing app dev, not just in BI, but enterprise app dev as well. Our biggest customer was Uber, and we did an exit to Uber, and we actually sold the entire company over to them. And so it was a good thing. And the guys at Uber were incredible, especially Tuan Pham, who was the head of the CTO, VP of engineering. He's an amazing individual. I had worked with him at previous companies. So it was all nice, but it gave us that inspiration to try to do a product, because this was all services, consulting, etc. And a lot of times, especially I think in Bulgaria, we feel like product is cooler.
Yeah.
And we want to try to do a product. And the market tells us that too, right? So like the multiple of your valuation multiple on a services company is like, I don't know, 0.75 to 2x revenue. And somehow with a product company, it's like 10 to 20x revenue because somehow it's cooler. And so we had this like, oh, we got to be cool. Oh, we got to make a product. and you know, we're maturing, right? So we have to go from like services to product development in our, I don't know, career life cycle. And we're like, here's how it actually happened with Mammoth. I'm getting to Mammoth. Sorry, this is a roundabout explanation. We were at a company called Agility Logistics. They're like a Dubai, Swiss, well, they were 14 billion at the time. And we had sold them, we had gone through bids, whatever, competed against people, a BI solution, a data warehouse solution. And we won. And then all of a sudden, the 2008 economic crisis hit. And they're a $14 billion company. You would think, oh, it shouldn't be a problem. But no, they just cut budget everywhere. And our BI solution, data warehouse, got cut. And it's like, we even had signed the contract. Like, we had won one. Contract was signed, and it was like, I don't know, €500,000. And back then, for a small consulting company, we were pretty excited by that. But the Oracle licenses were $800K, and the something else licenses were like another $100K. And the whole thing was, I don't know, close to $2 million all up. And they were like, oh, we just don't have the budget for it because it's a nice to have. And that inspired me. I was like so upset about losing because it wasn't the first time either. We'd lost on the overall price a few times. I was like, there's got to be a product we can make that competes with Teradata, with Oracle Exadata, whatever, that is cheaper. And at the time, that same dude that hired my old roommate, Brad, he was working at the archive.org, which is archiving the internet. And they were using this technology called Hadoop. And it was brand new at the time, because this is like 2007, 8. And they were running the internet org, the internet archive, off Hadoop. And they had a whole data center with a bunch of HP machines running Hadoop. And they were archiving the internet every night on this stuff. They had petabytes of data, petabytes. They even made a shipping container called the Petabox, which had like a petabyte of data in it. And the idea is that they wanted to ship it to the Library of Alexandria to have a backup of the internet that they were archiving. Super cool stuff. And I went to visit him because I was depressed. And I was just like, I'm going to go to the States and visit some other customers and get my mind off this losing $500,000 contract with Agility. And he was telling me about Hadoop, and he showed me the warehouse. And I'm like, so you're doing this to back up stuff, but you're also running analytics because people can like search internet history. If you go to archive.org now, the Wayback Machine, and I'm like, couldn't I use that for BI? And he's like, I don't know. So I call up Alex, who's my co-founder, and I'm like, Alex, you got to fly out here. We're going to meet with Brad. He's going to tell you about this Hadoop stuff. It's too complicated for me, but you'll figure it out. So I flew out Alex the next day, and we went to an Irish bar for like 5 days in a row, and Alex and Brad just like talked tech. And then Mammoth was born, and somehow we're going to take this distributed Hadoop version of it and make a database out of it, a distributed database. And we did. So we made Mammoth. We tried to raise money. Goes into one of your, anyway, it was an epic failure. And we can talk about that later if you want. So we made Mammoth, which is a product company. We raised money. We raised about 1.6 million in seed capital. It didn't go that great. And then we sold to MariaDB. And in the last 5 years, or 4 years, I was 4 or 5. I was at MariaDB. And my experience being in data and software at MariaDB, like another company, is what gave me the insight for Blastcap. And when I left MariaDB, or rather, I got fired in the last round of layoffs, I was like, okay, what am I going to do next? And what I saw as a weakness in the market when I was at MariaDB is, again, what I wanted to then do, because I like the space anyway, right? I've been in databases and data warehousing, whatever, for a long time. And the weakness I saw while at MariaDB is something I wanted to address, which was Blastcap, which is sovereign data infrastructure, which is a whole another topic about public cloud versus private and sovereign cloud. But
imagine you're explaining this to a recruiter. What is a sovereign database?
Sovereign cloud.
Sovereign cloud, okay.
I think that's a great question because obviously I'm in that space, so I love it. Totally biased.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, the market is in love with hyperscalers. AWS, GCP, Azure, Alibaba. Yeah. They're the best, And the line that's been sold to you is it's inexpensive. You're going to fire all your IT people. You don't need them, blah, blah, blah. I don't know a single company that's actually fired somebody moving to AWS. It's a lie, right? But they say move to AWS and you're going to have all these efficiencies. You can scale on demand, blah, blah, blah. And AWS, to their credit, has been incredibly smart and savvy. They built an entire ecosystem. So it's not, it started with EC2 and you basically had these compute you could rent and storage you could rent and backup storage you could rent. And then it's everything and your Lambda functions are there. Everything's there. So as a startup company, it's fantastic because you can just prototype there. It's all easy. You don't need anything else. And that is great. But I believe what really happens is, and I'm just going to approach one aspect of it now, which is cost, is what happens is as you scale, and they gave you a bunch of free credits, you get 5,000 of free credits with our startup program or whatever, is as you scale, however, the grim reality hits. It's ridiculously expensive, and they're smart, right? They have machines that are already, 3 years out, right? Depreciated. And they're still running them as the smaller instances or whatever, and they've got their new machines and whatever, but they're charging a bucket load for their infrastructure and their services. And as you scale, it's incredibly expensive. Founders Fund did a really cool blog about this last year where they were like, oh my gosh, all of our portfolio companies have leveraged the cloud, but they're spending oodles and they haven't actually saved anything. They haven't fired anyone. So you're just adding, because all those people just turn into DevOps or whatever people, which are somehow 30% more expensive. So they just reskill and charge you more because otherwise they're going to go to another company. I forgot the original question. Sovereign cloud, right. So one reason sovereign cloud is important is because large companies who are suddenly, 37 Signals is a very public, they make Basecamp, which is one of the oldest project managements. They do Hey Email now. Jason Friedman has written some really cool books about work and remote work versus hybrid work. So they're quite famous in the Valley, and I like them. And I use Basecamp myself. No plug or anything, but it's a very simple, cool tool. They recently have been super vocal on LinkedIn about cloud repatriation. Basically, they've dumped it. They were paying $87,000 a week for Basecamp alone, not including Hey Email, a week. What they did is they bought 12 large Dell servers, which cost about $87,000, a week of their expend, and they just rented some colo. And they were like, think about this. And this is what Founders Fund were saying. Okay, so you basically saved $1 million plus in 1 year. Over 3 years, when you're going to depreciate this hardware anyway, you've saved $3+ million. And that's just for one of their products. It's not, hey, email, it's just Basecamp. So overall, they're saving, because the email is quite intensive as well, probably $5 to $6 million. That's profit. Now, you're being valued on EBIT, a multiple of profit, right? Like, which is your profit. And it's usually, for cloud companies or these kind of companies, 20x, 15 to 30 sometimes, whatever. Now imagine, what does that actually mean? Not only are you saving $6 million over this period of time, you're increasing your valuation by how much?
20 times that.
Exactly, by 100 million or whatever it is. And it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. 60 million, 120 million, depending on your valuation. And Founders Fund literally wrote that. They called it like this dilemma of the cloud. So how are you going to like properly deploy capital? The other part of sovereign cloud is the sovereign part, which is, hey, and it came mostly in Germany from when the Obama administration was spying, had the NSA spying on and hacking Angela Merkel's phone. She didn't take it bad for some reason. Everybody was like surprised, like, oh, she doesn't seem that upset. But all of a sudden, you saw these initiatives like Gaia X and everything else in Europe and Germany, where all government and public stuff has to be on European-only clouds. So she kind of sneakily started this initiative. Oh, really? You're going to spy on us on my phone, where supposedly you're a Five Eyes trusted partner? And there's a huge sovereign, Dubai, United Arab Emirates and Abu Dhabi. Like, they have a policy, for example, G42 is their huge cloud. Absolutely no government anything on an American cloud. It's just not happening. Because they all know, thanks to Snowden, there's a back door. There's literally a pipe on every one, AWS, GCP, Microsoft, every single one of the big clouds. There's a little pipe that just goes to the NSA. And sovereign cloud is, we're not going to do that. So I think there's a nice mix of cost, and they realized that it was a bit of a lie. And so we need to control costs, especially at scale. There's the privacy security aspect, which for a lot of countries, they're kind of like, well, why do I want to literally just give a backdoor to the NSA? And I think those two are the main drivers for sovereign cloud. And the interesting part about sovereign cloud is everyone talks about the market for the hyperscalers being whatever, 50 billion growing to 120. The market for private cloud is 4 times that. It's huge. And if you think about it, look at Ionos or OVH. So Ionos is the largest one in Germany, OVH in France. It's a 4 or 5 billion cloud. There are zillions of G42 is another few billion. They're everywhere. And you kind of forget about them because everyone talks about AWS, GCP, and Azure. But the sovereign cloud, the private cloud market, here in Bulgaria, we've got Natera, we've got Cloud Sigma, we've got IDC, or whatever, i3DNet, or whatever it is. We even have pretty big ones here. It's 4 times bigger. And so my aspect was, I don't want to just address the hyperscalers because that's a very narrow part of the market. And what I'm seeing is the market starting to sort of pendulum. There's always this pendulum. It's like, oh, we love hyperscalers, the cloud, but the pendulum's going to hybrid, I believe. And thus Blastcap, because I was like, I want a philosophy where you can distribute anywhere. I mean, if you want to put it in your basement, put it in your basement. If you want to put it in a private cloud, put it in a private. Exactly. You shouldn't be restricted on where you distribute things. That's, to me, liberty and freedom as well. And I think that also strikes I don't know, it resonates with a lot of people. Like, I want flexibility, control, options. I want to put it anywhere. So thus,
Blastcap.
Wow, long answer, sorry guys, but thus Blastcap. But I think it's an important thing because I think sovereign cloud, and if you start looking at the 37 Signals guys, and even very large companies, I won't say them, but I know some very large companies that were spending $11 million a month in Azure. And they're starting to question, like, really? And they're repatriating. Cloud repatriation, sovereign cloud, it's going. So I think it's a really interesting future trend. Like, I know everyone's talking about AI, we can talk about that. But sovereign cloud, the pendulum's going that way. It's still cloud.
Yeah.
And I'll say, okay, can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Am I pushing it?
No. Come on.
All right.
Actually, we love it.
All right.
We really, really love
Here's
it.
the other interesting thing. Now, what happens with all commodity co-location centers? You know, you start off like EC2 did, like Amazon, right? You can rent virtual computers. But then, you know, Amazon raised the bar, so all of a sudden you get your Lambda functions there. Right? You get everything. It's like Christmas shopping. Now, anyone who's just a colo has to raise the bar. Because all of a sudden, Ionos is giving database as a service, and they're giving, you know, just turn your Mongo on. Because it's now this race in sovereign cloud to say, we're going to attract customers by giving, you know, automated backups, flexibility to scale up, down, you know, make our financial tracking so much easier than if you've ever seen AWS builds. You're like, what? I need a master's degree in finance for this. I don't get it. And a lot of patience. So there's this race now to add value-added services in co-location centers, because it's not enough to just say, oh, I'm going to rent my hardware there anymore. And that's the other interesting thing about sovereign cloud and the market in sovereign cloud, is that everyone is now seeing that they need to give their customers more. And that's the other cool thing. And the other reason I liked Blastcap is like, it's one of those layers of infrastructure as a service or platform as a service that helps clouds give customers more. It's like, oh, you want a database? Just push a button. Yeah. And I think that's a trend you're going to see more and more, is private clouds, sovereign clouds have to start increasing value-added services.
Yeah, no, I think we've actually seen the same in recruitment over the last few years. It's been AWS, GCP, Asia a bit less here in the Balkans, extremely popular in Sweden.
It's growing, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Wait, the case with Asia, it may be a little bit different, having in mind that Microsoft is starting this big project in Greece. I don't know how is this going.
Don't know it.
Yeah, I read that they're planning to, you know, hire quite a lot of people in Greece, operating in their data centers there. So
Are you opening a Greek office?
You're
You're thinking about it.
now,
We're thinking about it. I like a lot of things about Greece. But no, they're actually sinking data centers near islands. They're buying whole islands now, just for Azure and for ChatGPT and xCloud, which is actually why they didn't allow them to buy Activision.
Yep.
The UK didn't allow them to buy Activision based on how much they're looking to grow their
That's
cloud
super
service.
interesting.
Yeah, 10 years ban on acquiring Activision.
Maybe you should start a Greek.
Maybe we're already thinking about it.
Maybe. Chris will have to say about it.
Yeah.
It's close. We can drive down.
I have a very interesting. So you started in the Bulgarian tech market like some time ago. We won't talk about years.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, we don't talk about years. So
We already did, by the way.
how
They forgot.
how would you describe it when you started, like the landscape over here versus now? Like, how do you think the market's changed from then?
You know what's interesting? It's like fashion repeats itself, right? Yeah. So when I first started, it was kind of easy because there weren't that many competitors. You know, there was Musala, there was Wiscom, Sciant, there was a few others, whatever. SAP was here, and then all of a sudden, you know, the world found out how great Bulgarian developers are, and there was this massive boom, and all of a sudden, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't find people. We're not training enough people. The education system is amazing, but not putting out enough. Like the scale isn't there. And there were these big discussions about what are we going to do? And that moved to incredible wage inflation. And so I was dealing with, like, after maybe the first or second year at my job that I took with Wiscom Sciant. The first name was Wiscom, and I renamed it as Sciant. And weird sidetrack. I'm going to say this just to amuse you guys. I was in Germany, and I was selling this company called Technodata, and they were writing on a whiteboard, and they were really stiff Germans in costumes, right, and suits. And all of a sudden, they start abbreviating Wiscom as WC, and then they all start laughing because it's toilet in German, right? I mean, the water closet. And I was just sitting there, and then it happened like 2 more times with me, and I'm like, okay, that's it. We're changing the name. I'm not going to be like the toilet when I'm in meetings with Germans. Thus, the power of Germany.
Thus, Sciant was born.
Change it, and Sciant was born. And what I found, though, after a couple of years, I know. It's like, I was shamed.
It's a really amusing story, dude. I mean, it's something to remember. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely.
It struck a chord with me, right? I was kind of like, oh. And all right, it got even worse. I went to large sidetrack. I went to San Diego. There was a guy named Ron Hagley who was the CTO of a company called Iconics. Really cool guy. And one of those monogo directno, super direct guys, right? And we sat down at lunch, first time I met him, and I gave him my business card. He said, Steve, at WizCom. So you're a toilet. That's a really stupid name. He just literally said that to me. First thing, I just met the guy, and I'm trying to sell him, right? And one of my rules is remove every barrier to a sale. I mean, it's just silly. And I went back and I told my board of directors, I'm like, guys, we are changing the name. I'm not doing that again. And they were like, yeah, okay. So we did. Anyway, fun side, back to the main topic. And we had this explosion in wage inflation. You couldn't hire anybody because everyone was hiring. And it was I felt like we just relived that. And it was really difficult to keep people and all that kind of stuff. And you had to, really bend over backwards to hire great talent and retain great talent, have good projects for them, all that kind of stuff. And then after the crash, that kind of went away for a while, and then it came back. So it's like it was this cycle. And now there's another massive crash. I mean, the media isn't talking about it much, but it's a difficult market out there. And so I think, the pendulum has swung the other way, where it used to be really an employee's market. It's becoming more of an employer's market. That being said, I like the creative disruption, because one of the big issues I had go back to the manufacturing firm, is they didn't have a lot of pressure to improve and change things. One of the cool things I think the hard market in 2003 to 5 kind of did, when there was massive wage inflation, is it forced tech companies to adopt way cooler practices. Even back then, I was super into be hybrid. Don't come to work at 9, whatever. Come to work when you want. Like, why should you waste an hour in traffic to get here at 9? Where if you want to just spend 10 minutes in traffic and get here at 10:15, do it. I don't care. What I care about is the customer is happy. So I even back then took a people service profit. If I make my own people, and I know a lot of people say the customer is first, but my people were first, because I recognize that if my people were happy, they're going to make the customer happy because they're happy, and then I'm going to get more profit in the long run. So even back then, I was very flexible, but it forced all the companies, I think, to adopt these kind of practices of be more flexible, treat your employees way better. I think there's some perks, bonuses, etc. So there's some good that came from that, because those are good things, like treating your people humanly and not like products.
Like resources.
We've heard that from.
Well, that's why I hate the term human resources in HR. The entire term is hideous. It's
especially in a market like ours.
And that's the exact opposite of what you're supposed to be, right? You're supposed to be the epitome of human. You're supposed to be thinking of really cool policies like you do about what if I have a deaf person? How do I actually adapt to that person to make them succeed and fit in really well and help them be hired, right? Which is things you guys do. And it's not HR, right? Resources, if you think of people's resources, you're thinking of extraction and wealth generation. I mean, that's not the right attitude, which is one of the reasons I love you guys. And that was a reference from earlier, so the viewers would know that these guys were giving deep consideration on some sort of different types of candidates and how do you accommodate them, and that's human. That's a cool thing. Yeah. So I see the same trend. It's good and bad though, because the bad for an employer like me, for example, is it's really hard to find people, but the good is it's making all the boats float, and now there's a little drown trend, I think. But again, there's going to be good from that, right? We're going to figure out ways to then recalibrate and work with good providers like you guys to ensure that, I don't know, maybe we refocus, maybe culture becomes more important. Because a lot of times, I'll stop. But a lot of times, especially as you scale, what do? You hire based on skill not just culture. And that's when I think a company loses their soul, because you have this pressure to hire whoever you can because the market's so tight, and you forget the importance of culture. And then like some weird cultures just kind of splinter off, and the company loses really the soul, the mantra of who it should be. And that is something that I think we all sacrifice in a tight market, but we shouldn't. I don't know. Can I plug you guys?
Yeah,
Am I allowed?
absolutely.
No.
I wasn't paid. I promise.
Actually, the viewer should know that we do have some kind of a script that we're trying to follow, because we really try to prepare about this podcast. But with you being a guest of ours, it's really nice to speak about the things like they are. It's really something that it's kind of coming pretty naturally, and I do appreciate it, and I believe from children.
We'll get to him. I just gotta say this. So I have found, okay, I'm old, right? So I've done a lot of hiring, and I have found that I think you should elevate culture to the level of importance of profit. And no one quite gets that, but it goes back to that people service profit. When you have a tight people with a very unified culture that's driving in a direction you want to be driven, like for your customers or for your product, then you're going to get that profit. And if you start deviating from that, it's an issue. What I loved about working with you guys is you take the time to talk to me, and you don't talk to me, your first things weren't about what's positioned you need. It's tell me about yourself, your company, your needs in general, what you're doing, what your goals are. So you're delving into the culture I want to create, and you actually respect that. And then you find people that you think meets that first, and the skills come second. I can always train skills if you don't have it, right? But I can't deprogram someone. It's like you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and they don't want to be. Like maybe they're not a fit, and they shouldn't be a fit for my company. But what I think is amazing about you guys is you understand that there's a broader spectrum to human hiring. I wouldn't even say human resources. You said it yourself. We're not a resource to be traded. We're a culture to be worked with. Like, it's different. Anyway, sorry, next question.
Actually, it's such a good point. It's such a good point, but there's also the problem where I think a lot of companies have given up on creating a culture.
They have.
Yep.
They've seen their culture fade away, or like,
Because they just hired on skill.
yeah,
Forgot about it.
yeah, because they have projects to deliver.
On the other side, this is something totally normal. In an expanding economy, in a market like ours, where you need to hire in order to grow, this is what should be happening.
Long discussion.
True that.
I would counter that. We have to do a part 2 in summer on the rooftop. I was promised there might be a rooftop podcast in the future.
There will be a rooftop podcast in the future. Yeah.
But that's an excellent follow-up question. I won't do it because I know we have other questions, but that's a really interesting branch of thought that we should talk about.
Something that I would like to ask here, because obviously we're speaking about the big game, the general understanding about how the IT market works. But I'm really curious, looking backwards, what were the unique challenges or opportunities, if I may say something like that, you faced in Bulgaria? Because we are speaking now about the resources, we are speaking about the terms that have determined the cultures and etc. But what was the thing that you found really unique about the Bulgarian IT market back then and even now?
Unique.
Yeah.
Well, back then it was different, right? Like things were a bit more gray. And coming from Australia, I had to sort out that. So that was unique for me, dealing with that sort of ambiguity in the gray market. But we sorted that out. But it took an effort, meaning, and it has an impact, right? So if some things are gray, that means if you as developers get older, they want to go buy a house, get married, have kids, right? They want to go to hypotheca, a mortgage. But if things are gray, it's a little bit more difficult. So one of my first initiatives, it was kind of unique for me in this market, was getting everything 100% white. And that means a lot more expense. So I had to then go out and raise my rates and do all this kind of stuff, which was, there's a whole challenge around that. So that was my first unique kind of experience coming from Australia, where none of that is is normal, I guess. But that's okay. It's fine. And then Bulgaria did the amazing thing of doing a flat tax, which is absolutely fair, and everyone just is like, yeah, easy done. Other unique things compared to some countries, especially in IT, is, and I'll say this because I'm this way, and so I feel kind of like Bulgaria is my soul mate. Bulgarians are много директно. Like, they're super direct, and they're not afraid to say things. I love that, because if we're doing development and we're working with teams throughout Europe or United States, what I have a challenge with, and I have worked in India and Vietnam and with Chinese development and Philippine and Malaysian and a bunch of other places all around the world, because I'm old. What I love and what's really unique about the Bulgarians, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's super unique, like Bulgarians, Russians, Ukrainians, Eastern Europeans in general like this, we have this hubris, but it's not hubris. It's not misplaced ego, but it's self-confidence, I would say, that we're allowed to we feel comfortable saying whatever the heck we want to say, and if we have an opinion, we're not afraid to say our opinion, or to be fearless to say, I don't get it. And I've even had cases where my developers have been like, no, you're wrong, to my clients, where I don't get that. I mean, maybe the other culture is just too polite or something, but the Bulgarians will just be like, no, that's stupid. And I love that in a way, because it comes across sometimes a little offensive, but super genuine, and that we have a very strong opinion and we can justify it. And they can debate. So if my clients say, well, what about XYZ? They'll be like, okay. But if they don't like the opinion, they'll be like, no, you're wrong. It should be XYZ or whatever, WX something. Yeah. And that's pretty unique, because I only see that in Eastern Europe in general. I mean, so it's not super unique. There's a few countries that do that, but I love it. And I also think it creates a lot more value, because that's the kind of people I want. I want people that can challenge me and my clients. Because if you just like get a feedback loop, right? I mean, you just get yes men. Yeah. We're here to say, well, it's a better way. And that's a polite way of putting it. But we're here to say, well, no, we can do better. And Bulgarians will do that. So that's pretty unique. And I still see that. And I love that. And I feel that means our startups, our products, our outsourcing companies, our people are absolutely way above most other developers. And I'll say this as well, because I've worked with, VMware, for example. A lot of times VMware would say, we factor in a 30% reduction in productivity with some of our other centers, not with Bulgaria. When I was with VMware, they put us one-to-one with California. Absolutely. Because usually you factor in at least 10% just for the communication gaps. Like you're in another country, there's overheads, whatever. No. They put our productivity at one-to-one on all the rankings. And that's awesome.
That's the daily dose of self-confidence that we all need.
But that's unique. You do not get that in every country.
Yeah, but somehow we are used to, think about ourselves like people that are, I don't know, maybe that we are not that great and not that good, which is something that really bothers me, because it's not true.
It's absolutely not true. And when you start working with companies, they recognize it. Uber.
Yep.
They used to have 7 interviews in California. When I started with Uber, we had a mandatory 7 interviews in California. We got to 3. They kept 7 in California because our people were really good. And they were like, yeah, we're not going to waste time anymore. I'm telling you, world-class companies, Uber, VMware, whatever, every company I've worked with, and I've worked with many, DHL, they just quickly recognize our people are amazing.
They are.
Hands down.
Something that I really would like to ask here, because, again, you're quite experienced guy, and I'm really curious to know your opinion about, what are the current trends that you're seeing in the Bulgarian IT market? Like where this market is going, how it's changing, how do you see its development in the upcoming, let's say, couple of years? Although this might sound like a little bit HR-ish question. but again.
I know, Chill should answer that. Well, you guys are the experts. Well,
Come on, you're an expert.
but I'm from the other side of the table. Oh my God, I am literally from the.
You are literally there.
All right, fine. Well, again, I see a downturn now. All right, so that's going to change things. We were all a bit spoiled, and maybe we're going to be a little more selective. The interesting part for me is the elephant in the room. It's pretty sure it's right over there. Is AI, right? Is that going to affect? Is generative language going to affect code, jobs, everything else? And for me, this is a really interesting question and an interesting opportunity for Bulgaria. 1896 or 83 or something, Norbert Wiener was, I think, the first person, mathematician, philosopher who really got into cybernetics. He coined the word cybernetics and was really into AI. And he posited the question back then when they were looking at AI and sort of automation in farming. Will AI or automation create this amazing opportunity for humanity where we all are benefiting from the productivity of AI and, sipping lemonade on the beach? Or will it create a situation where the paucity of economic opportunity devastates humanity? And that was super interesting to me. And I think Norbert Wiener is still a really interesting person to review in terms of AI now, because you have these two sides. One is, AI is going to kill humanity, and the other is it's going to be the best thing since toast. And I think Bulgaria is in a unique position to take advantage of this. And maybe what I'm going to say is not appropriate, but I think from what I've seen in every one of these technological waves, like the internet revolution or whatever you want to call it, the agricultural revolution, etc., is those people who are unable to adapt to change and are mediocre get disintermediated. And that is bad. But those people who are able to adapt to change excel. And in particular in Bulgaria, I believe we will be able to adapt to change, and we will use AI to create a more productive situation for us. I think most will be disintermediated by AI, and that'll be a challenge. And it's tough to say this eloquently because it's a very big conversation, but I do believe the two sides of the story are okay, AI are going to kill us, right? That forgets, Norbert Wiener would be saying that, but that forgets there's a bunch of other technologies that might elevate us and other things going on at the same time, or people that could adapt. Where on the flip side, there's the side that AI is going to make us all so much more productive. That's never happened. It's a lie. So if we actually look at, real income, for example, especially in the Western countries, yes, it's gone up, but quality of life has gone down. So when you used to have one wage earner in the 50s, 60s, 70s being able to create a nice standard of living, now you definitely need two. So it's it's supposed to make us all more productive and more whatever, but not really. It creates a bigger rat race. So you have this elite in the United States, but you also now have to have a two-family income. So we've actually destroyed, in some sense, quality of life for this chase of productivity. Where on the flip side, so I would say on the flip side, technology in general has raised all the boats in developing countries. So yes, there's that argument that, standard of living has gone up everywhere else. But when you start looking at the Western world, I actually would argue standard of living has gone down in some ways, because you can no longer have a single family income in most median households in the United States. And the income disparity between rich and poor is the largest in the history of the United States. even during the robber barons and the Gilded Age. It's the largest in history. And there's a destruction of the middle class. So you have the situation where AI in a large population like that basically only serves the elite. And it does. And that's okay for the elite. In Bulgaria, I think it's a little bit different. We're a small country, like Switzerland, for example, and we have a pretty well-educated workforce who have the ability to still critically think and adapt to change, which I think is the most important skill ever. When I was a kid, I once read this interview with somebody, I don't know who it was, and they said, the biggest skill you can ever have in the future is the ability to adapt to change. And I still think, 40 years later, that's crucial. And that's what will enable Bulgarians to take AI and use it as a tool to elevate themselves rather than be used. Because we're a pretty well-educated and adaptable society. So I think for us in particular, this trend is going to be one of those where we use it to create more productivity and efficiency, where in other cultures and societies, it's going to devastate them. So I have this weird dichotomy. I think Bulgaria is going to, the trend of AI and generative languages in Bulgaria is going to make us excel, where if you're a mediocre, basically AI is going to become a bad to mediocre but super knowledgeable developer. They have all the knowledge, but they're bad. What is that going to do? Disintermediate the legions of bad developers. Yeah. But because we're actually quite skilled and good and thoughtful, we'll escape that and we will use it to increase our productivity. I think. That's my prediction.
No, you actually touched on the wider academic debate there. Yep. Back in 2016, I had to do that as part of my HR degree. Talk about the threat of AI, or is it a threat or a promise?
It's both, right?
Yeah, so the consensus was there's going to be either a redistribution of wealth globally or a reinforcement of wealth for some people. But there were a lot of people who were saying that actually it's a lot of, how do I say this, basically spooking the globe about AI taking all the jobs. Well, in reality, a lot of scholars actually believed it will create a lot more opportunities because it will make jobs but we are yet to see it. And Microsoft actually awoke that debate very well with OpenAI.
I think it's going to be both.
Yeah.
And it depends on how you react to it and how we react to it in this market. But absolutely, and this is why Norbert, I think he's right in many countries. It's going to disintermediate fleets of mediocre and bad developers. So if you're a developer from, I don't know, somewhere where you just cut and paste stuff, we don't need you anymore. Yeah. But if you're able to see the fundamentals of the architecture and know some core actual development, you're going to become more priceless. And you're going to leverage it.
Actually, there is a whole theory about this adaptive evolution that we are probably just living in. Saying that not the ones who survive are not the ones that are smarter. The smartest people, not the most hardworking, and the only people that will, eventually be the so-called elite will be the people who are most adaptive and most agile. So it's not only a topic of this, specific discussion. It's more like a general discussion here.
Yeah. I'm all into that. And I think that's going to be a trend. And I think Bulgaria will jump on that to our benefit. Other trends, the good thing is I've seen the evolution of Bulgaria into really world-class product companies like PayHawk, right? So we have these unicorns. And I love that. We have cool companies like LaunchHub that are funding these companies. So we've had a bigger VC ecosystem. Well, whatever, we've got more VC than we used to have, whether it's 11, LaunchHub, BrightCap, you name it. There's more. Yeah. And they're more savvy. And that's a nice thing. And so I see and also companies like Speed Invest out of Austria. I love Speed Invest. They're amazing. They're one of the few companies still very actively willing to invest in Bulgaria, right? And Speed Invest, like Ali and some of the other guys there, are fantastic. So we have more VCs that recognize Bulgaria, and it's just a fact, right, as an investable country. And we have more actual like unicorns growing here. So I see that in Bulgaria as well. Like we've evolved from sort of an outsourcing destination to a real community of product development, enterprise, outsourcing, a whole mix.
Yeah.
And that's nice. The only thing that we need to try to do is, continue training and investment in general, of the people. But I think these trends like AI is going to elevate us. VC is going to elevate us.
Това беше всичко от нас за този епизод на Look Who We Found, подкастът за хората от IT индустрията. Благодарим ви искрено за подкрепата и ще се радваме да ни последвате в социалните мрежи и платформи. Ако искате да си поговорим за пазара, за възможностите в него или търсите съдействие в привличането на талант, свържете се с нас. Все пак това ни е работата. До скоро!